Alright fellas, UFC 330 is happening this Saturday in Philadelphia. Makhachev and Garry will be taking each other on in the main event. And today, I will be going over the entire card, giving you my breakdown of every fight on the card, starting with the early prelims, going all the way up to Makhachev and Ian Garry. And we will start with the first fight of the night, which just so happens to be Jeremiah Wells taking on Myktybek Orolbai. As you can see by these odds, I'm probably going to be... Oh, fantastic. Love this website that they've put together here. But like I was saying, I'm going to go with Orolbai here. He is a minus 900 favorite. But to give you a little bit of a breakdown, Wells is kind of crafty. He's kind of crafty on the feet. But unfortunately, as you can kind of tell from the build that he has here, he's about 70 to 80% upper body. And what's going to happen here, I believe, is Orolbai is going to pressure him. He's going to be able to take him down, and if he doesn't get a finish via submission or ground and pound, he's probably going to get a dominant decision victory like we saw him get in his last fight against Chris Curtis, because at welterweight, it seems like he's doing a lot better. Even if he didn't finish someone like Chris Curtis, he was able to really dominate and show that he can dominate with a grappling heavy approach at a heavier weight class, as opposed to when he was down at 55 and he lost a fight to Rebecki. He had a little bit of trouble with Uros Medic in the first round, right? In this fight, I think it's going to be pretty dominant for Orolbai. Like I said, Wells can be crafty on the feet. He probably will tag Orolbai up on the feet. Orolbai does not have great defense on the standing, but eventually I think he's going to be able to get Wells down and get either a submission or a decision. I'm going to go with Orolbai by a second round submission, either a Kimura or some type of choke. I'll go rear naked or Kimura in the second round for Myktybek Orolbai. Moving up to the next fight on the card, we've got Magny and Ramiz Brahimaj. This is one of the tougher ones for me to pick, so I've gone back and forth on this one all week. Magny, an absolute crafty vet. He is like the name of the game, the definition of a crafty vet. Also the definition of a cockroach, right? He's not going to be getting those first round finishes. And if he wins, he's usually almost getting finished. And then he turns it around. Similar to like we saw in the fight with Jake Matthews rather. He was able to survive the submission attempt, which the ref kind of called it off early. He was able to win that fight with submission with Jake Matthews. He was able to win the fight in the third round against Mike Malott after losing the first two rounds in the first half of the third round. And that's basically what he does. He cockroach maxes. He either gets dominated in the first round or he cockroaches and comes back with either a submission or a crafty TKO victory, or he might just go outright and win a couple rounds, which is what I think he's going to be able to do against Ramiz Brahimaj in this fight. Brahimaj, he's got good power, he's got good front chokes, which I think is great because we've seen Magny get caught in a couple of front chokes, especially in his last fight he had with Yaroslav Amosov, but I don't think that Brahimaj is the same level of threat on the ground or in that front choke position as Amosov. So I think I'm going to lean towards Magny in this one to get it done by decision. I think that in order to beat Magny, you've got to have big power, which Brahimaj does have decent power. But when you see guys like Carlos Prates or Michael Morales beat Magny, they're very overwhelming and they're always putting him on the back foot. And Brahimaj just isn't aggressive enough for me to pick him in this fight. If I thought he was always going to be on Magny's toes here, pushing him back, I would probably pick him to win by a submission after knocking him down or just a straight up KO. But I think that Magny's just going to be good enough to tag Brahimaj up on the outside. And if Brahimaj decides to shoot for takedowns, Magny's got great takedown defense. He'll probably be able to stop him. And honestly, I think if it gets to the ground, Magny's probably going to have the advantage if he's able to get on top. So I think I'm going to go with Magny by decision in this fight. And I believe that is an underdog. Yes, he's a plus 110 underdog. I'm not extremely confident, but I do feel pretty good. I'm taking Magny by decision over Ramiz Brahimaj. Moving on to the next fight, we've got Rafael, Tobias, and Lucas Fernando. Absolutely stacked card, by the way. I guess it is the early prelims. So my deal with this card, we'll talk about this later as well. As for the prelims, the prelims, no complaints from me. These are sweet, sweet prelims. We got Orolbai in the prelims, Magny on the prelims. You've got a good debutant in Lucas Fernando on the prelims. Tresean Gore, Vicente Luque is going to be a banger. Charles Johnson fights are always fun. Chidi and Njokuani is always fun. Like, it's great fights on the prelims, but on the main card, these are all prelim fights. Barboza, Ribovics, what are we doing? That's a prelim fight. Abdul-Malik, Stoltzfus, that's probably an early prelim fight. Jalin Turner and Quay Fernandez is the feature fight of a numbered event. But anyways, we're going to get back down to the Rafael, Tobias, and Lucas Fernando. And I'm going to be taking Fernando on this one. He's got the better frame. He's more aggressive. He's got big power. And I think he is a little bit chinny, but I do think he's going to be able to get this one done by KO. And by the way, if you haven't spent much time on the UFC website, you'll realize that he is actually not 0-1. I know the UFC website's going to tell you he's actually 0-1, but Lucas Fernando is not that. He might be like 13-2 or something like that. I could be way off. He's a pretty good fighter. He won on the Contender Series, and now he's here making his UFC debut. Rafael Tobias, he's going to try and get Fernando down here, and his path to victory would basically just be that, grappling, trying to get Fernando down, holding him down, landing some good ground and pound shots. But I think Fernando's going to be too much early. I would say if this goes into the second and third round, I would lean towards Tobias to get it done. But I think that Fernando's going to be able to get this one done by KO in the early moments, in the early rounds of this fight. So I'm going to go with Fernando to take this one by a first round TKO as expected per the odds as a minus 300 favorite. And do stick around to the end, guys. We are going to be going over my lock of the night. And on this channel, we don't do minus 900 Myktybek Orolbai as locks of the night. Our locks of the night have to be minus 300 or less, because what's the point of putting a bet on someone that's a minus 1,000 when you can put a bet on someone that's minus 200 and you know they're going to win, right? So we'll get to that later, but now we move on to the prelims with Vicente Luque and Tresean Gore. And I think I'm going to go with Tresean Gore in this one. I believe Vicente Luque is 34 years old, but it feels like he's 40. And I think it's going to show and look like he's 40 in this fight. Not as aggressive as he used to be back in the day. He's not as powerful as he used to be back in the day. I know he did crack Kevin Gastelum and Temba Garimbo, but I think Tresean Gore is kind of coming into his stride. The 7-4 record is pretty yucky, but he's got great front chokes. His guillotine is actually nasty, and that's what I think is going to happen in this fight. I think we're going to see a Tresean Gore. First of all, this is going to be a sick fight. Even in Vicente Luque's couple of losses, especially in the fight against Alvarez, early in the fight against Yoel Alvarez, he was still hitting Alvarez pretty well, and we'll talk about that in the Njokuani and Alvarez prediction. But in the Luque-Alvarez fight, he was tagging Alvarez early. He looked pretty solid on the feet in the first round, in the first half of the second round, but he just doesn't seem to have that same power that he used to. He doesn't seem to have that same animosity that he used to fight with. And I think Tresean Gore is really starting to get hungry. He's starting to find his stride. And he's got great power. He's got a great guillotine. So I think if he's able to hurt Luque, he's going to be able to put him away with a nasty guillotine finish. So again, I'm not super confident in this pick, but I do like Tresean Gore to win this one by submission. I think there's going to be a lot of finishes on this card, and I think Gore's going to be able to get one. I'm going with Tresean Gore by a second or third round guillotine after an absolute war from these two. I'm looking at maybe a fight of the night. I'm going to go with Gore, the minus 125 favorite, to take this one by submission. Moving on, we've got Donte Johnson and Eric McConico. This is another one I've been back and forth on all week. If you look at these absolutely amazing records, you're going to say, oh, Donte Johnson, we're 8-0, right? We're shooting for the stars, right? And we're going to land on the moon is Donte Johnson. And then you watch his fight with Cody Brundage. If you watch that fight with Cody Brundage, you're probably going to be wondering why this 8 is not over here, because he looked like he was 0-8 in that fight. And he won. It It was controversial, I believe, but he did win the fight 2-1 against Cody Brundage. I think McConico also had a split decision win over Cody Brundage. So I feel like they're very similar levels. But what I'm saying is Donte Johnson's footwork, he just looked like super yucky. He was in the mud. His hands just were it looked like he was not comfortable with holding his hands up. It looked like he wasn't comfortable with how he was moving. It just looked super awkward and not right. I don't know how else to describe it. It just didn't look right. But with that being said, he is undefeated because he has great power. When he's swinging, he swings with like 110% power every single time. And that's why I'm eventually going to pick him kind of reluctantly here, because McConico is a clean striker. He's kind of been fed to the wolves in his career, really. He's debuted against Ribovics, I believe. He lost to Susurkayev, Tung Suhur, Bengasur, whatever his name is. But recently, he did get that win over Cody Brundage. He got that win over Rodolfo Vieira as well, which was a pretty good win. It showed he had good takedown defense, which I think is good in this fight because Donte Johnson, that basically regulates Johnson's only path to victory to strikes, which I do think is going to get it done. But McConico is a very clean striker. He's got good kicks. He's not super aggressive, but he is clean and technical on the outside. But he does get hit a lot is the issue. In all of his losses, he's getting hit and hurt bad. He got put away by Susurkayev. He got put away by Ribovics. And I do think that's what's going to happen here in this fight. I think Donte Johnson, he's going to look kind of iffy on the feet. McConico's probably going to look better in a visual aspect, but I think eventually Donte Johnson is going to be able to land a big shot. He's going to be able to hurt McConico, and I think he's going to be able to put him away by a round 1 KO for Donte Johnson. But if he doesn't, and if this goes to a decision, I'd be very surprised if Donte Johnson won, and I would lean towards McConico. As for my official prediction, I'm going to go to Donte Johnson by a first round KO. I'm picking the -240 favorite to win. Moving on, we've got Charles Johnson and Eduardo Chipolin. This fight was initially Charles Johnson and Jose Ochoa, but Ochoa dropped out with injury, and now this Chipolin guy is coming in on short notice. He's making his debut. He was an LFA champion at flyweight. He's got great hands, great power, and recently Charles Johnson has been getting hit up by Almabayev. I know Almabayev won that by submission, but he was tagging Johnson on the feet. Johnson also got knocked out by Alex Perez. He was getting messed up a little bit by Kavanagh in the first round before getting that KO. He's kind of just been getting hit a lot, but I am going to go with Charles Johnson to win this fight. I think that when you get a young guy like this Chipolin guy to fight Charles Johnson, I think Johnson's just going to have the upper hand. The thing with Charles Johnson, right, is he's a really long flyweight. He's got a 70-inch reach, which is big time for flyweights. He's 5'9", and you would expect someone with that frame to really be on the outside with leg kicks, hitting with jabs, 1-2, outside bouncing. But Charles Johnson fights really well on the front foot, and conversely, if you put him on the back foot, that's when he seems to have a lot of trouble, like when he was fighting Joshua Van, Bruno Silva. He won that fight, but it was close, and it was a split decision. But my point is, when you get Charles Johnson moving back, he has a lot of trouble finding the power that he puts away Joshua Van with when he's coming forward with an uppercut, when he's countering Loner Kavanagh after Kavanagh backs up with his chin up in the air. When Johnson's on the back foot, he can't put a lot of power into his shots, and therefore he kind of just swings his arms out there, and they're kind of nothing punches when he's trying to fight on the back foot. With that being said, I just think the Chipolin guy, I think he's going to be too green in this fight. I think he's going to be a little too aggressive in the first round because he's used to getting these first round knockouts. And I think Charles Johnson's going to be able to find a late KO after Eduardo Chipolin kind of decreases in his stamina and wears down. So I'm going to go with Charles Johnson in this one by a second or third round KO, like he usually does in most of his fraud checks. Not that this is a fraud check. I would expect Johnson to be the favorite in this matchup. They don't have the odds posted. I'm going to go with Charles Johnson by a second or third round KO. It could be a decision. Honestly, the more I think about it, I think it's going to be a Charles Johnson decision in this one. So we're going to go with Charles Johnson decision by winning at least the second and third round. He also might win the first round. Who knows? But I think Chapolin's going to be dangerous early, but not enough to put away Johnson, the grizzled vet. So we're going with Charles Johnson by decision in this one. Moving on to Chidi Njokuani and Joel Alvarez. Ooh, I almost don't want to pick, because usually when I see a plus 225 underdog, this seems like big time, but I think I'm going to go with Chidi here. Joel Alvarez is stepping up on short notice. This was supposed to be Chidi versus Jeff Neal, I believe. And the one thing, I think this is going to be a good version of Joel Alvarez because he is typically a guy that fights like once a year, maybe twice if you're lucky. Him stepping up on short notice is kind of telling me that he is 100% ready to go and in great shape. But with that being said, I think Njokuani is just such a good Muay Thai stand-up striker. And Alvarez, I feel like when I watch him fight, I'm expecting this crazy dynamic boogeyman that I don't know why, but I have this image of him in my head, that he's this crazy dynamic, athletic striker that's also huge and moves super fast and is super technical. But in reality, when I watch him fight, when I watched him fight Vicente Luque and I watched him fight Yaroslav Amosov, he's kind of just plodding around there. And I feel like when he eventually moved up to welterweight, his size and physicality advantage that he had over these smaller lightweights is kind of been taken away from him, and he's not able to just plod towards these guys and really make them fear just his presence, right? And Njokuani is definitely not going to be fighting on the back foot against Alvarez. He's going to be in his face, the classic Thai style. He had a great fight against Carlos Leal. He did lose, I believe, but that was a super, super close, super bloody fight. And that's kind of why I like Njokuani in this one, is he's not afraid to be in a dogfight. Alvarez hasn't had a ton of adversity in his career, even in his losses, right? He's been like destroyed by Sarukian. He got pretty much schooled by Amosov, but he hasn't had a tight 29-28 war loss or a 29-28 split decision war that he won, right? He's either getting dominated or he is doing the dominating. And what I've seen of him, kind of what I said when I was talking about the Vicente Luque fight, is he gets hit, man. When I was watching the Luque versus Alvarez fight, Luque, like I said, he doesn't carry the same power that he used to, that one-shot KO power. But Alvarez, he was just getting tagged up in the pocket. He was trying to take one to give one. And I think Njokuani is going to be too long for him to do that. Njokuani does have the reach advantage. He's going to be too long. He's going to be too active. Alvarez likes to pick his shots and take his time on the outside. And I think Njokuani is just going to overwhelm Alvarez in this one. I think I'm going to go with Chidi by a decision. I could be wrong, but I think he's going to be too much. I think he's going to be too active. And I think Alvarez just isn't going to have the answer. Plus, Alvarez doesn't really shoot takedowns, and we know that is kind of where Njokuani, he's a Thai guy, right? He's not super great on the ground, and he can be beaten there, but Alvarez, I believe he hasn't shot a takedown in his entire career. He has a couple submission finishes. Those are just the classic, you hurt a guy, get a front choke win, right? So I think I'm going to go with Chidi in this one by a decision. Moving on to the main card, can't believe I'm saying this. What are we doing? Edson Barboza and Esteban Ribovics is on the main card. It's an all-right fight, but understandably, when you take a look at these odds, you can probably guess that I am picking Esteban Ribovics to win this one, probably by a first or second round KO. I know that he did have a war with Daniel Zellhuber, and that's not aging very well for him, but considering that Ribovics is a really small lightweight, not in terms of height, but that 69-inch reach is really hurting him, especially when he's fighting a super long fighter like Zellhuber. So I won't hold that too much against him. He did win that fight, I believe, but it was a war. But I'm not going to hold it too much against him because Zellhuber is just a bad matchup for him. But Barboza is not, at least at this point in his career. We've all enjoyed watching the Barboza highlight reels of him spinning, wheel kicking all these guys. Kevin Lee, Paul Felder in the balls, Dan Hooker, Terry Edom, right? We love watching the highlight reel, but he's old, man, and he's just, look at the eye on this cat. I mean, I know it's not funny really, but that has happened over his career. 5 years ago, both sides of his face looked like that, right? I think we're gonna go with Ribovics in this one. He does kind of throw caution to the wind. There is a chance that Barboza does catch him here. Barboza has not been super aggressive. He used to throw in great combinations, but now he's kind of just a one shot at a time type of guy. And against Ribovics, you can't just throw one shot at a time, right? You have to be able to prepare yourself to be in a war. And I don't think you can win a war by just throwing one power shot every other minute. I'm going to have to side with Ribovics in this one. Not sure why this matchup has been made. It appears that when UFC fighters get old, the UFC just decides to give them to these young guys that are on the up and coming and ready to get a KO win. Like last week, Darren Elkins, you're gonna retire, and your final fight is against this up and coming Puerto Rican dude who's a minus 900 favorite against you, which I think is crazy. I think you got to have a little bit more respect on these guys. I don't know what Edson Barboza did to the UFC. And this, by no means am I saying this is unwinnable for him, but I have to go with Ribovics by a first or second round KO. I could see him just overwhelming Barboza similarly to what we saw against Jalin Turner. I think he's just going to put Barboza on the back foot, land some good punches. He might land a head kick. Either way, I'm going with Ribovics by a first round TKO against Edson Barboza, and Barboza might hang up the gloves. Moving on to the next fight on the card, Mansur Abdul-Malik and Dustin Stoltzfus are making their way onto the fourth fight down on one of the biggest cards of the year at Mansur. This is kind of similar to the Donte Johnson Eric McConico pick for me, except I am going to very clearly and not very hesitantly pick Mansur Abdul-Malik. I believe I've been a Mansur Abdul-Malik hater for my entire life. Not exactly in the fact that I hate Abdul-Malik himself, but I hate that the UFC was pushing this guy like he was some type of boogeyman in the middleweight division, when he's really just, in reality, a athletic American that can wrestle and has good power. But he's not really outstanding really anywhere. At one point, he was undefeated, and he was actually a favorite against Belgarui, which I was all over. I didn't have a channel at the time, but if I did, I would have been telling you to bet the house on Belgarui as a underdog. He's 9-1. He is powerful, like I said. He's good. He has good wrestling. Stoltzfus is also pretty solid on the ground. He's got big slams. He did notoriously break Joe Pyfer's elbow with a takedown. Real ones know Stoltzfus does have a win over Pyfer. Is he better than Pyfer? I think that's up in the air, man. I think this is pretty cut and clear. Mansur Abdul-Malik, although I'll probably pick against him in any fight where he's fighting a top-level middleweight, anyone near the top 15. But Stoltzfus lost to Gastelum in this point in his career. Not a good look. So I think I'm going to go with Mansur Abdul-Malik by either an overwhelming decision. You know what? I could see Stoltzfus surviving and maybe winning a late round against Mansur Abdul-Malik. So I'm going to go with Abdul-Malik by... Oh, he could submit him as well, but I'm going to go with Abdul-Malik by a dominant 30-27 or 29-28 decision where he loses the third. I am picking him as a minus 650 favorite. We move on to the feature fight of the night, Jalin Turner and Kawe Fernandez in the feature fight of a numbered card. UFC, what are we doing? I mean, this is absolutely dreadful. And like I said before, this is a great fight. I have no problem with Jalin Turner and Kawe Fernandez being on the fight card, but it's just a prelim matchup. Everything on here except for the title fights are prelim matchups in my mind. So I don't know why we couldn't get a Joe Pyfer on this card. I think he did get hurt. I think initially we wanted Pyfer and Baraujo, but Pyfer got hurt. Okay, so where's Sean Brady at? Why can't we get him against Amasov on this card? We have Jalin Turner and Kawe Fernandez. Jalin Turner has 9 losses? Ugh. Well, that's not a good look. Kawe Fernandez, Many of you may not have seen this guy. He does beat up on nobodies, really. And I think Jalin Turner in this one's just going to be too much. He's continuing to weight bully at lightweight. 6'3", by the way. 155-pound person that is 6'3". Yeah, that's insane. So I'm going with him. I'm picking Jalin Turner in this fight. I wouldn't be surprised if Fernandez was able to win it, but I think one of the main weapons that Fernandez has is those low kicks, and Jalin Turner has had great low kick defense in his time fighting. He has had a couple of issues in the Dan Hooker fight where I think he honestly gassed himself out after almost getting that head kick finish, and he kind of had an adrenaline dump in that one. I think if they fought again, I might even pick Turner, but that's besides the point. I think that Turner's just going to be too powerful here. He seemed to have a second wind in his career. He retired kind of after the Bajo Mondes. He got subbed by Bajo Mondes in their fight, and I think he retired. But now he's back. He beat Barboza dominantly, and now he's ready to... I think he's going to make it back to the top 15. I really do. And I think that starts with a win over Kawe Fernandez here, who has looked great, but he has looked great against very subpar competition. And that's just kind of where I'm coming from with my Turner pick. I think Turner's just a different level from a Harry Hardwick, a different level from a Muhammad Yahya. And I think that Kawe Fernandez is going to try to establish low kicks. He's going to have trouble with that. And Jalin Turner eventually is just going to rack up. He's got so many weapons on the feet. He's got great head kicks, great body kicks, great leg kicks. His hands, he's got a great reach advantage, I'm sure. He's got the 4-inch reach advantage on the feet, and he's good at using that. He fights long. He fights great off a counter. I could really see Kawe Fernandez throwing a low kick most of the way through the first round, and Jalin Turner defends it, checks it, moves out the way, and then connects with a nasty counter right, counter left, whatever stances they may be in at the time. And I think Turner can definitely get this one done by a finish in the early rounds. So like I said, I have a lot of finishes on this card. I think Jalin Turner will be another one. I'm going to go with Jalin Turner by a first or second round KO over Kawe Fernandez. And on to the first title fight of the night. Some of us may dog on women's MMA at times. I do sometimes as well. But this is a pretty good fight. Gillian Robertson and Mackenzie Dern. Mackenzie Dern, she's great. She's all right on the feet, great on the ground. Gillian Robertson, pretty good on the feet and great on the ground as well. So this is going to be a great fight, and it is my lock of the night. As you know, locks of the night on the channel are less than minus 300 favorites, and that is exactly what Mackenzie Dern is. She's minus 220, and I feel really good in Mackenzie Dern winning this fight. I'll tell you what, I think Robertson is the better fighter on the feet. I think if someone was to get hurt on the feet, it would be Mackenzie Dern. But I don't think Gillian Robertson is going to put away Mackenzie Dern, right? Mackenzie Dern, she's kind of a blockhead. She just throws strikes on the feet, really with the intention of getting the fight to the ground. And Gillian Robertson is her main method of victory is by ground and pound and submissions when she's in top position. And first of all, Mackenzie Dern is great on her back. She has no problem fighting off her back. She'll just throw a bunch of elbows. She'll just throw up an armbar, throw up a triangle. She has no problem doing that. And I think those type of scrambles, if Robertson is able to get Mackenzie Dern down, I think those types of scrambles will lead to a Mackenzie Dern being in dominant position. A Mackenzie Dern getting an armbar after reversing position. A Mackenzie Dern getting dominant position and finding some ground and pound, and Robertson gives her back. Something like that, right? I think that Mackenzie Dern has been finished. She has been showed levels on the feet. Those are against the elite of the elite flukesters, the elite of the elite high-level strikers in the women's divisions. And those are your flukesters, right? Amanda Lemos, fluke merchant. Jessica Andrade, power fluke merchant. Is she a man? I don't know, but she does fight in the women's division. Amanda Lemos and Jessica Andrade have the type of power that Gillian Robertson doesn't have. Robertson is crisp on the feet. Her striking looks pretty solid. She's got pretty good hands. But I think Mackenzie Dern is good enough to not get destroyed on the feet and eventually take this to the ground. Or even if Robertson gets it to the ground, I think it's going to be good for Dern. because Robertson isn't going to be able to finish Dern on the ground, at least in my opinion, and Dern's going to be able to reverse or threaten off of her back. So in the end, I think Dern's going to be able to get either a submission or just a victory based off of submission threats, based off of damage done on the ground, and it's going to lead to a 49-46 or 48-47 decision for Mackenzie Dern. I think either way, this will be a close fight, but it will be a clear win for Mackenzie Dern. So my final prediction is going to be Mackenzie Dern by decision. And in the main event, we've got Islam Makhachev and Ian Machado Garry. Prepare yourselves, fellas. I'm picking Ian Garry. I'm picking Ian Machado Garry to win the main event at UFC 330. Before you call me crazy, anyone with a brain knows that this is not a clear Islam Makhachev prediction. If you're picking Islam, you know that Ian Garry can win. I'm not saying it's obvious that Ian Garry is going to win, but that is what I think is going to happen. I think this is where being at welterweight starts to add up and it starts to make sense for Islam Makhachev. I think that this is the fight where you get into these tall, lanky monsters. I know Ian Garry isn't a crazy finisher, but his build for welterweight, he's a big, athletic, quick welterweight, like a Carlos Prates, like a Michael Morales. These guys are different at this level and at this weight. And I think Jack Della Maddalena is one of the last welterweights in that era of the Leon Edwards, of the Bilal Muhammad, where they're kind of the same size as Islam Makhachev. JDM was the last champion of that era, and we have now entered the era of the Ian Garrys and the Michael Moraleses and the Carlos Prateses. And I think Ian Garry is the best suited of those three to take on an Islam Makhachev and to compete with the grappling prowess of an Islam Makhachev. We've seen in his fights, Ian Garry did lose to Shavkat Rakhmonov, but that fight was not because Shavkat was able to dominate on the ground and consistently get Ian Garry down to the ground. It was because Shavkat was able to hit Ian Garry on the feet because he did have a similar reach. He was a similar size to Ian Garry. But in this fight, Ian Garry's going to have the reach advantage. He's going to have the speed advantage. He's going to be floating on the outside, and he won't have a problem with being against the cage, I think is the main thing. Islam does have great open mat takedowns. He has great judo. He has great wrestling, all that. But when you take away the cage wrestling, it becomes a lot easier for Ian Garry to float around on the outside and feel comfortable on the fence. He has great takedown defense against the fence. We saw that against Shavkat. He did great at using his long limbs to be comfortable in the clinch, to use his hands to separate Shavkat's hands and to really get out of that position. And I think we're going to see similar things in this fight. I think that Makhachev is going to hang around on the feet for a while in the first round because those opportunities won't be presented as they were in a JDM fight where JDM needs to be going forward in order to win. And then Islam can just catch him going forward. Ian Garry isn't going to be pushing forward like a Jack Della Maddalena is. He isn't going to be pushing forward like a Dustin Poirier is. And even that, Dustin Poirier was able to consistently get up, right? And I think that Ian Garry's just going to be better on the outside. He's going to be better fighting off the back foot. And Makhachev isn't the most active striker when he's going forward, because usually when he's going forward, he does have good striking and he does mix in the striking to then set up the takedowns. But when the takedowns aren't as present as they are in those fights against someone that's constantly moving forward, his striking isn't going to be as crisp. It's not going to be as threatening, especially when Ian Garry's constantly moving. He's constantly moving away. He's throwing the leg kick. He's throwing the oblique kick. He's throwing out the jab. Garry doesn't have outstanding boxing, but those kicks, I think, are really going to be what does it for him on the outside. When he's moving backwards, he can stop on a dime and throw up a head kick against Makhachev. And those weapons like Makhachev hit Volk with, when you're fighting a guy that's 6'3", and not 5'9" like Volk, that head kick isn't as easy to just throw out there, right? It takes more effort, and he's probably not going to throw a weapon like that. So Makhachev's really, I think, in this fight, going to have to rely on his striking with the hands and with his wrestling in the open mat. And I think that Ian Garry just has too many advantages in that space, in the open mat. He's not going to give Makhachev all those opportunities. When Makhachev gets him down, because I don't think that Ian Garry's going to go 25 minutes without getting taken down against Islam Makhachev, one of the best grapplers in the UFC. Even when Islam gets a takedown against Garry, in my opinion, Garry has good enough jiu-jitsu to work off of his back. He might throw up a body triangle off of his back like we saw him do against Michael Page. We saw him throw up that body triangle off his back just to secure the safety of the position. And we know that Makhachev doesn't get overzealous when he's on top. We know he likes to take his time. He doesn't rush submissions. When he gets these submissions, it's because a guy like Moicano is getting up and wrestling up into his chest. So that presents him with a front choke. Same thing with Poirier. Ian Garry isn't going to rush back up after his feet if he's already on his back. I think Ian Garry, if he gets down, he might work some good jiu-jitsu to get up safely. Islam's not going to be able to get Ian Garry down enough to then rack up that control time and win enough rounds. So I think Ian Garry is probably going to win the first round just based off of Islam trying to find where he can get a takedown, and Ian Garry hammering away with low kicks, body kicks, head kicks, oblique kicks, throwing out a jab every once or twice, throwing up an uppercut to prevent Islam from feeling comfortable shooting his head down. I think Ian Garry might take the second round. I think in those later rounds, though, it's going to be more competitive. Islam's going to be able to find a takedown like Shavkat did in the fourth round of the Ian Garry fight. We saw Shavkat have a lot of trouble getting those takedowns in the early rounds. And I think that Islam could win he could win the third round, he could win the fourth. But I think Ian Garry's going to have done so much damage to Islam Makhachev. And I know that sounds crazy because Ian Garry is not a power puncher. But we know that Islam, he shows damage very easily. Poirier fight, he has that crazy gash. You can still see the scar between his eyes. I think that's going to open up. You see the bruising under his eyes he got when he fought Volk. I think that's going to show up. I think he's going to have red marks on his body. His legs are going to be marked up. And that damage is really going to add up. And I think in the fifth round, I think it might come to the fifth round. Or Ian Garry might win 4 rounds. But if it comes to the fifth round, I think that damage is going to pile up. And you're going to see the visual damage on Islam's face, on his body, on his legs. And I think Ian Garry's going to be able to hit Islam enough to then sway the judges in his favor and give him a 48-47, 49-46 win. Now, don't let this distract you from the fact that Ian Garry is an annoying person, is a very dislikable person. I'm not saying I like Ian Garry. I'm not saying I support Ian Garry as a person, but he is a great fighter, right? And please, I mean, I would have no issue with Makhachev winning this fight. Let me be clear. If I had to choose a winner, I would probably choose Islam to win this fight. But just based off of my analysis, what I've seen, I'm going to pick Ian Garry in this fight. I don't look forward to watching interviews with him as a champion and his wife backstage puppeteering him as he takes these interviews, but I'm going with Ian Machado Garry to win this one by decision, and he is a substantial underdog, I believe, as well. Yeah, plus 225. I'm going with Ian Garry to win this one by decision over Islam Makhachev, who some people think's the GOAT right now. So I'm going with Ian Garry, plus 275. That's great value, in my opinion. I think Islam should be the favorite, but not that big of a favorite. I'm going with Ian Garry, Mackenzie Dern as my lock of the night, Jalin Turner, Mansur Abdul-Malik, Esteban Ribovics, Chidi Njokuani, big underdog, Charles Johnson, Donte Johnson, Tresean Gore, Lucas Fernando, Neil Magny, and Myktybek Orolbai. So those are my final predictions for the UFC 330 card going down in Philadelphia this Saturday. And I'm really looking forward to it. It's a great main event. Not an outstanding main card. Good prelims though. Make sure to like and subscribe if you did enjoy the video and want to see more prediction videos. I also post short form content on this channel. I post quick main card recaps. I'll do one of the 330 card as well. And I also post my clips from my long form videos on my main channel, Too Much Fighting. So make sure to go check that out as well if you want more meme, funny videos, UFC fighter tier lists, and stuff like that. And once again, thank you so much for watching. I will see you next time.